Hey, what's up? Coach Ryan Family here from VIPAR. It has been a hot minute since I've updated you, and I apologize on that. I've been super busy with physical therapy, doing my rehab 2 to 3 times a day, as well as driving around to all my various doctor's appointments to try to get sorted away. But I want to give you a quick update on how rehab is going for me, as well as the necessary steps I'm taking to get back in the game. It's been 7.5 weeks now since I've tore my pec, had it reattached, and now I'm in the midst of an aggressive physical therapy protocol. When my therapist and I sat down, my therapist knows me. We've been friends for years, and he knows what kind of a meathead I am. He knows what I'm going to do to it later once I'm healed. So we set out an aggressive rehab protocol. He's bounced it off other therapists, and many of them have said, that's too aggressive for my liking. But aggressive is good for me because it keeps me motivated. Now, therapy, there's basically 3 distinct phases. Actually, before I even talk about the distinct phases, I want to make a quick disclaimer here that this is my physical therapy, not yours. If you are injured or had surgery, bounce it off of a medical professional. Take their direction instead of mine. I'm just telling you what I did or what I am doing currently, okay? So I'm 7.5 weeks post-op right now, and there's essentially 3 different phases of post-operation therapy. The first phase was 0 to 2 weeks, and in that phase, the incision was just healing. That's the wound healing phase. I was opened up from here to here, and they went in, grabbed the tendon, pulled it, stretched it back out, drilled a hole through the head of the humerus, weaved some ortho cord, which is like a really high tensile strength dental floss, weaved that through the tendon, and then embedded it back into the arm bone or the head of the humerus. So the first 8 weeks, it's just that little bit of cord holding the pec together. But after 8 weeks, the bone closes. So the first 2 weeks is just wound healing. So that big incision has to heal. And during that time, you don't want to do anything that's going to stress that incision. So I was limited to basically hanging arm circles, some table slides, as long as I didn't feel a pull at the incision site. That's really it. Some very light isometrics, bracing against an object, doing some external rotation, some extension, just pushing in, but nothing that really puts a stretch on the front of the shoulder. That's weeks 1 and 2. It's all about wound healing. There's really, and you don't want to put any tension on the pec. Weeks basically 2 through 8, that's where the bone closes down over the repair. So starting in week 2, I began doing some very gentle pec squeezes. Now, this is where most therapists would disagree. Most of the time, you don't load the tendon until around week 8. And that's when they would start the gentle pec squeezes. Because I've got good motor control, I started them very, very lightly, like a 2% squeeze. Very gentle and just holding for 10 seconds. And my therapist was okay with this around week 2. Weeks 2 to 4, that's pretty much all I did. That, and we worked on gaining passive range of motion. So he would stretch me in this plane, do some mobilizations at these angles, but he was always supporting the arm, or she, depending on the therapist. They were always supporting the arm to make sure there was no load at the tendon. It was passive range of motion. So just joint mobilizations during that phase. For my homework, I was doing a lot of banded external rotations, some scapular strengthening, shoulder blade squeezes, things of that nature. Around week 4 and 6, then they started to let me get a little more aggressive with the pec squeezes. And this is again where most physios would disagree. But I began some isometric pec flexes. So I'd brace my arm, I'd internally rotate and brace against a structure, and then I would squeeze and flex the pec. At week 4, I would only do it about 15 to 20% of maximum contraction. Once I got into week 5 and 6, they let me go 100%. So I was really trying to drag the rack over, just squeezing hard, everything I got. After week 6 now, I'm allowed to get into a little more stretched range. So now I'll do isometrics from this angle, really pushing hard, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. The other thing that happened in week 6 is I was beginning to start isotonic loading, or loading with movement. So I actually did dumbbell floor presses. The first movement I did was floor presses. If you remember, I injured myself doing floor presses. So psychologically, this was a big hurdle that I needed to get over. So they started me off with floor presses for that very reason. So I started with dumbbell floor presses, really light, pausing on the floor, squeezing up, holding the contracted position really tightly. And that was in week 6. From there, now I have actually started full range of motion dumbbell presses. I'm not even to week 8 yet. So a lot of physios would freak out and say, gosh, that's too fast. But if you remember, I was using wound healing peptides. I get sleep, I eat well, I train hard, fairly young, not as young as I used to be, but I'm not a 65-year-old. So all those things taken into consideration, my physios agreed to push me a little harder. So one of the things I introduced just yesterday was the 2 up, 1 down dumbbell press. So I would essentially lift the dumbbell up with 2 arms, then with my surgical side, lower it on an 8 count. Really slow, full range of motion, and then grab it and then lift it with 2 arms. The eccentric loading phase is good for tissue remodeling. So in cases now once we get past the 8-week mark, we want to mature that pec tissue. Okay, we want to remodel it and mature it, get the fibers to lay down in the correct angle of pull. So that's why we got to start tugging at the repair. Now around week 8, the bone will completely close back over the tendon. All the sped up healing mechanisms will stop. And basically from there, it'll just be go as tolerated. So I'll start off very, very light with different push-up variations, some dumbbell pressing, and progress as I'm able, as my strength allows. All during that time, I'll be getting treatments done on the pec. So Graston treatments, active release techniques to make sure that scar tissue gets aligned in the correct direction, and the pec fibers, the tissue matures properly. And then from there, I'll just work to get stronger again. So I'm almost to that 8-week mark. They're almost ready to start taking the reins off a little bit and let me go at it a little bit harder. Again, I've been very aggressive. If you go online and look at a lot of pec rehab protocols, they won't even let you start isometric loading until week 6 to 8. So the fact that I was doing that in week 2, I'm just accelerating things a little bit. And you know what? Healing's been awesome. I really haven't even perceived any pain or difference in the pec since around the 7 to 10 day mark. It's felt completely normal since then. So I think it's been the right choice. I'm still being smart about it. I'm not super loading up. I'm not doing anything crazy, but we're just being intelligently aggressive, let's say. Now during this time, the rest of my training, I've been focusing on aerobic capacity. I'm going to do another video here shortly to show you some of the things I've been doing for aerobic capacity, but I've really laid off the weights. I'm down 20 pounds since I tore my pec. Some of that's body fat, but some of it's also muscle tissue, just because I haven't really been lifting. The reason I haven't been lifting is because I'm also trying to rehab this side, my quote unquote good side, which is also a trashed joint. So I've just completely laid off the lifting. Aerobic capacity and therapy has been my only go-to for the past, well gosh, I had surgery 2 weeks after I ruptured. So about 9.5 weeks now, that's all I've been doing. Down 20 pounds, aerobic capacity is improving, and all in all, I'm feeling pretty good. So hopefully we'll continue on with this therapy. I'll show you some exercises here in a little bit. Once I cut away, I'll flip and show you some of the drills I've been doing for therapy, so you get an idea of just what I'm doing for periscapular strength and for rehabbing that pec. So I'm Coach Ryan Finley from the VIPAR Pit. Check out these exercises that you see here after this video. And again, if you're injured, go see a physio or a doctor. Don't take my advice. I'm showing you this just so you can be educated and entertained. All right? Thanks. See you. This drill is just to tie in the core with the shoulder. So we're looking at stabilizing on a single limb, which activates the serratus as well as the rotator cuff and the lower trapezius, again, while tying it into the core musculature. This is quadruped shoulder taps. As I get further in rehab, that'll progress to shoulder taps from a full push-up position. Prone snow angels with sliders are great for increasing flexibility on the front of the shoulder girdle, as well as proprioception on all the periscapular and rotator cuff musculature. This transitions nicely into prone shoulder press on the sliders, which helps to re-groove the shoulder press pattern in an unloaded condition. This is a good one for the lower trap. Basically, it's a lower trapezius or trap 3 raise with a band, but they had me do it from a dead bug position to keep my lower back in neutral so that it wouldn't overarch my back. It's a common mistake that a lot of people make when they do lower trapezius work, is they'll arch the lower back. This is a great way, and you can do it with a band or a pulley, a cable. It's a great way to do it and keep your lower back neutral. So I go here and I go in the dead bug position, my legs out and my lower back pressed into the ground. Whoop. And then just do a lower trapezius raise. Another one that I've been doing a lot of is some ball wall action here. This is an 8-pound ball. One of the first drills they would have me do would just be gentle rolls up the wall, just walking the hands up. This is good for upward rotation of the scapula, serratus anterior activity, as well as lower trapezius, and just keeping strength in that range of motion. From there, they would have me do one-handed, putting the ball against the wall at different angles, pinching the shoulder blades, and just doing circles, wall circles. Forward, backward, or excuse me, clockwise, counterclockwise. They have me do it facing the wall, all different positions and different arm angles. A lot of times with the rotator cuff or with shoulder pain in general, it's due to poor timing of the rotator cuff and the muscles that control the scapula. Not necessarily a strength issue. A lot of times it's just a timing issue. And these ball wall rolls and different drills with the ball on the wall can help improve that timing of that musculature. This is a nice one called Serve the Tray. I got a band wrapped around my back, palms are up, and I'm just reaching and pushing forward with the shoulder blades. This is awesome for activating the serratus anterior against a little bit of resistance because that external rotation position shuts off the lats, which are powerful internal rotators. This is a really good one, and I mixed it up. Sometimes I would do longer duration pauses in that contracted position, and other times I would pump out the reps just as you see here. This drill here is just designed to get a little bit of tension through the rotator cuff through external rotation, all while cueing a pinching of the shoulder blades as well. This is a nasty side-lying plate or dumbbell series. On my heavier days, I did mix it up with a dumbbell, oftentimes going up to 10 to 15 pounds. On my lighter days, I just use a plate or a bottle of water, something like that. It starts with side-lying punches, which activates the rotator cuff and the serratus anterior. Then progresses into side-lying powell raises, which gets a little more posterior delt, a little more rhomboid, and a little more of the trapezius involved. And then from there, it progresses all the way into a side-lying punch into shoulder flexion. Again, that side-lying position provides somewhat of an unloaded position for the shoulder, at least in terms of the plane that we normally operated in as we're sitting up or standing up. So it's a good way to work on improving range of motion when still weak. Then this progressed into side-lying external rotations. At the end of this series, my cuff, my posterior shoulder and rotator cuff was absolutely on fire. Great series. Next one I do would be some banded shoulder flexion. This is good for the rotator cuff, the lower trapezius, as well as just scapular proprioception. I would take a mini band here, put it around the wrist, create a little bit of separation, and then lift up, going into shoulder flexion. Okay, I'm not going completely overhead, mostly because my left good shoulder lacks range of motion, but if you have the range, you work on going all the way up. Next drill for the cuff, again, we got the band here. We're gonna put it around the wrist with the arms behind the back. This is a good drill for supraspinatus, which is a rotator cuff muscle. You're gonna keep your posture nice and tall, shoulders back, and simply separate the band behind you and hold for 30 seconds. Bring it back in, pinch, separate the band, and hold. Awesome for the shoulders, for the rotator cuff. From there, I would move to gymnastics rings or a TRX to work on a rowing pattern from a reclined state. Sometimes I would just work on straight arm scapular retraction. Other times I would do a full row like you see here to work the muscles of the upper back as well as the lats. Hands always in a neutral grip position. Once the rows were completed, I shifted over into a incline push-up with the hands elevated. This is an easier position as it unloads some of the body weight. I like the rings for the instability that they provide. This is great for working the timing of those shoulder muscles. I kept it really slow and gentle here. There really isn't a ton of loading on the pec, but there's enough to get some blood flow and bring some nutrients to the tissue to speed the recovery process. After the push-ups, I moved into the 2 up, 1 down eccentric dumbbell press. I would lift with 2 arms and lower with 1 under a 6 to 8 second count, going very gently into the stretch position. Eccentrics are great for remodeling tissue because they only recruit about half of the muscle fibers, but they recruit them twice as strongly. So it's great for ensuring that the scar tissue and the maturing muscle tissue gets laid down and the fiber orientation is correct. All right, thanks for tuning in. Those are just a couple of the exercises that I'm doing right now for physical therapy. I'm doing these 2 to 3 times a day. keeping the weights pretty light. 3 times a week I will push the weights a little bit heavier and then back down to the light weights for recovery. We keep it light so we can build proprioception, we can reprogram good motor learning or good movement patterns, and to gently provide blood flow and gently tug on the tendon repair. We alternate some heavier days in, again, 2 to 3 times per week to try to build strength. But we can't do that every day because then we wouldn't recover. So heavy 2 to 3 times a week, light 2 to 3 times a day. And it's very time consuming, but I'm committed to making a full recovery. I'm committed to getting back to smashing heavy weights. Even though I'm enjoying this aerobic capacity cycle, it's boring me to tears sometimes. So I want to get back to lifting heavy. But thank you for following along in this journey. I'm Coach Ryan Finley from the VIPAR Pit. If you like this video, please hit subscribe below, and I'll catch you next time.